Hey there, guys. Thanks for dropping in. It's great to have you here with me, and a very warm welcome to the Holy Shed. Now, in recent sheds, I've been talking about a couple of well worn phrases in the evangelical lexicon that are being converted and that are being saved. And if you've moved in evangelical circles at all, you'll be very familiar with these phrases, both of which, of course, are synonymous in those circles with becoming a Christian. And as we know, those phrases and others like them, indeed the whole business of Christianity for evangelicals, is closely bound up with the business of our eternal destiny, whether we go to heaven when we die, to be with God, or spend eternity tormented in hell. Now, I've said it before, but I want to underline it a thousand times, that the notion of eternal torment for me is ridiculous and medieval. And actually, there's good reason to believe that this notion of hell, as it is, popularly or commonly understood, is a medieval invention. There's a very good book that argues that point cogently. It's called Inventing Hell by John Sweeney, and he basically argues that the idea of everlasting conscious suffering in hell owes much more to the poetry and writing of Dante in the Middle Ages than it does to the Bible. And I believe that, very much so. I don't believe it is a biblical thing, actually. I think it's like a lot of things. They're read into the Bible from predisposed ideas that we've heard and embedded in ourselves, rather than things that we actually find in the Bible. But anyway, that's just one book you might like to check out if you're interested in studying the subject a bit more. Inventing Hell by John Sweeney. But apart from all of that, the idea that people will suffer for eternity for not jumping through the hoop of giving their heart to Jesus, another natty little evangelicalism, well, it's just absurd, especially given the many good reasons why people may not be Christians. And I think if I hadn't grown up with it and see what I now see of the way Christianity exists in the world, I doubt I would be a Christian. But the fact is, I can't believe for a moment that anyone who says that they claim or claims that they believe in eternal torment, I can't believe that they have ever truly given the subject a moment's rational thought. Because as soon as you do, as soon as you expose that to any sort of critical thinking, the idea that people will suffer forever and ever and ever for not believing in Jesus, it just falls apart in a million pieces. But it's not just because of the sheer unreasonableness and injustice of it that I say this, but because I believe in the God of Jesus Christ, a God of love and justice, and there is nothing remotely loving or just in the eternal torment scenario. I grew up with it. I first doubted it when I was, I think, about 10, and I was lying in bed, troubled and wondering why it could be, or how it could be right, that because I had grown up in this country to Christian parents, instead of, say, to Hindu parents in India or a Muslim family in Egypt, that I get to believe in Jesus and be saved, whilst my Indian or Egyptian counterparts believe something different and go to hell. At the age of 10, it was pretty unthinkable for me to say that out loud, to disagree with what I've been taught. But I think the seeds of doubt were planted there, and it triggered a whole journey of being able to doubt and question things without fear that in itself was going to send me straight to hell. To be able to discover a faith and a God who I could honestly and wholeheartedly believe in and love, because that other God, the God of hell and all that, is not a God I can at all believe in. And the more that I've talked about this journey, with people along the way, the more people I've discovered have gone through or are going through a similar process, and are often really strengthened to hear someone like me speaking, because they get to know that they're not alone in having those doubts and questions. Anyway, today I want to talk about another phrase that I learned as a child and which shaped my early understanding of Christianity, that of being born again, which is probably the favourite way for evangelicals to speak about being a Christian. In fact, so important is this phrase that in evangelicalism it's become a kind of standard qualifying prefix, if you know what I mean. So not just I'm a Christian, but I'm a born again Christian. Another one is I'm a Bible believing Christian. And these are just ways of saying I'm a proper Christian. I'm not like others. I'm not nominal. I'm not just a traditional believer. I'm a proper Christian. And the more I've heard it sort of spoken, the more that phrase, born again Christian, sounds to me a bit like a special handshake, if you know what I mean, or a club badge. It's language to say I'm not a nominal or just a churchgoer, I'm a real Christian. Understandably, for many people in the wider population, born again Christian conveys something different, something like weird or cranky or tub thumper, maybe even culty. And for some people, it even sounds threatening. It can be weaponized. In the US, of course, the United States, it may mean Trump supporter, or it may mean anti-choice. Here in the UK, it may imply anti-LGBT or anti-gender equality. And if you find yourself in one of these categories, someone who's painfully faced the issue of abortion, say, or who is gay, or whatever it is, then that label can be quite threatening, because of the whole agenda, socio-political agenda that goes with it. What born again certainly communicates is us and them, okay? The saved over against the sinners. So it's immediately a phrase that suggests an exclusivism. We have got this, you haven't. We know Jesus, you don't, etc., etc. Jesus, on the other hand, we know in the Gospels was a friend of sinners. He hung out with and defended them against the saved of his day. He told his disciples, those who are not against us are for us. What has transpired out of all of this is a whole subculture identified by this phrase, born again, which I think is actually a bit of a misnomer in the way that it's used, a theological mistake, since the way it's commonly used nowadays bears no resemblance to the biblical text that it arises out of. Indeed, many argue that the phrase is actually a mistranslation of the original words in the Greek which are used in John's Gospel. It's certainly a classic example of taking the one and only place, and that's all it is, the only place in the whole Bible where it appears, and turning it into this major generalized category. I mean, if you move in evangelical circles, you'd be forgiven for thinking it must be on just about every page of the Bible. It appears once, folks, once in John's Gospel. And the passage concerned, of course, is in John chapter 3, where Nicodemus, a member of the Sanhedrin, went to speak with Jesus under the cover of darkness to have a confidential conversation. The Sanhedrin, by the way, was a powerful group with authority over both religious and civic affairs, and it was comprised mainly of wealthy men. And it's no wonder that he met with Jesus at night, because Jesus had a reputation, or Nicodemus had a reputation to preserve. And earlier in that day, and just immediately before it in chapter 2, in John's Gospel, Jesus had basically caused havoc in the temple by going in there and lashing away, driving out the merchants and the money changers, who were approved, of course, by the temple authorities. So he basically challenged the entire corrupt establishment of the temple. He was an agitator and a disruptor, and not someone for an authority figure like Nicodemus to be found in the company of. But Nicodemus seems to be hungry for some of what Jesus had. His opening statement is, "We know that you are a teacher who has come from God." And Jesus, cuts straight to the quick and says, "Very truly I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God without being born from above." Now the King James Version renders that, "You must be born again," as do actually other translations favoured by evangelicals. But most of them, even those Bibles, have a footnote to say, actually, this can be translated born from above. And better translations, in my view, like the NRSV, which is used much more commonly today, certainly in Anglican churches, they state it clearly as, "No one can see the kingdom of God without being born from above." So I think it's reasonable actually to say that the born again is not biblical. But, we could argue about that. So is it splitting hairs? Well, I think there's a whole discussion to have about that. But more importantly, I think Jesus is absolutely not telling Nicodemus to become a Christian. That's not what that passage is about. It isn't Jesus telling Nicodemus, "You must become a Christian, and then you'll go to heaven when you die." Of course it's not what that is about. Jesus is a Jew. He remained a Jew to the day he died. And this is Jesus as a Jew pointing another Jew to the mystical heart of a faith which they shared. But pointing to something which transcends that faith, and in fact I would say transcends all faiths. It is that out of which all faith, any faith, arises. Like all fundamentalists of whatever stripe, Nicodemus was a literalist who could only interpret Jesus literally. How can anyone be born again after growing old, he says. He's the one who uses the again bit. I'm not talking about being born again like that, Jesus says. I'm talking about being born from above. But even then, Jesus wasn't speaking about above in a literal sense. He was talking about a different realm. Not this world that you inhabit. You've got to be born from somewhere else. Nicodemus wasn't just a literalist. Of course, he was steeped in the rigmarole of a whole religious system. But like every true mystic, Jesus transcended the outward forms of religion, his own, and pointed to the heart of faith, the mystical or spiritual core of Judaism, but would equally apply to other faiths too. You're going to have to start all over again. That's what Jesus is saying to Nicodemus. You got this all wrong, mate. If you want to know what I'm talking about when I talk about the kingdom of God, you're going to have to start again. That's what he's saying. You're in the realm of system and ritual, the outer shell of faith or religion. You'll never perceive the kingdom, the realm of God, from that place, from that perspective. You're going to have to be born from above, i.e., come from another place altogether, enter the realm of the spirit, which, he goes on to say, like the wind, can't be predicted, can't be captured, can't be defined, can't be systematized. We're talking about something deeply elemental, this core, passionate spirit behind faith, rather than all these outer things of doctrines and rituals and institutions. I want to just play you a clip, actually, of the fabulous Austrian Benedictine monk David Steindl-Rast. if you've been to Soul Space with me, you'll have encountered David before. He's now 97 actually, and to me, he's one of those Jesus figures. And this little clip is him in a dinner conversation with a Jewish rabbi and another lady who's hosting it, and they're having a conversation about religion and mysticism, and he's explaining about religious how mysticism, I should say, is the originating source or heart of religion. Anyway, let me play it to you. You're going to love him if you haven't seen him before.
Theology is.
So did everybody start as mystics and then religion rose?
The religion starts from mysticism. There's no other way to start the religion. But I compare this to a volcano that gushes forth. This Big Bang experience. And then the lava flows down, or the magma flows down on the sides of the mountain and cools off. And when it reaches the bottom, it's just rocks. You never guess that there was fire in it. So after a couple of 100 years, or 2,000 years or more, what was once alive is dead rock. Doctrine becomes doctrinaire, morals become moralistic, ritual becomes ritualistic. What do we do with it? We have to push through this crust and go to the fire that's within it.
Now, this is beautifully simple but profound, and I think what you've just seen there is a little glimpse of something that probably much more resembles Jesus talking on this subject than an awful lot of the way it's been interpreted today. I think it's precisely what he's saying is precisely what Jesus was getting at with Nicodemus. Religion begins like a volcano with fire at its core. And then it tumbles down into the realm of religious establishment and eventually cools off and loses its fire. It's been locked into sort of doctrinal formulations and liturgies and so on that loses the fire. And this is what I understand Jesus to be saying to Nicodemus. It's like you and your religion have solidified, cooled off, lost the fire, lost the spiritual or mystical core. You're going to need to be born from above or born from somewhere else, born from the fiery heart of faith all over again. Now, all of our churches tend to go through a similar process to the one that David was describing there. It's not the systems and establishments are, bad things in and of themselves. It's just that they can so easily become the extinguishers of the fire. So, something that is a product of the fire ends up kind of being the enemy of the fire, the extinguisher of the fire. So this is how I see it, folks. Jesus isn't having a cozy chat with Nicodemus about how to get saved, about giving his heart to Jesus so he won't go to hell when he dies. That's not what born again means in this context. It isn't a one-off thing to begin with. This is your passport to heaven. Believe these things, believe these 4 spiritual laws or whatever, is sometimes talked about. Say this prayer and then, no. The symbol or figure of rebirth is something much more profound, and it's a continual process of reconnecting with the roots or reconnecting with the fire in the rocks, as David was putting it, the fire at the core, actually, of our own souls that we lose touch with. And the thing about these symbols and metaphors of fire and wind and water is that they're elemental, which means they're wild, they're uncontainable, untamable, free from all efforts to domesticate them into nice little religious formulas about being born again Christians or into organized church systems. Spiritual rebirth is about something much bigger, much deeper, less definable than all of those things. So yes, all of these phrases, like being saved or converted or born again, I think, become misnomers when they are domesticated or become hackneyed or reduced to insurance policies to make sure that we go to heaven when we die. Faith that has a fire in its belly or got wild wind in its sails is faith connected to the mystic heart and soul that first brought it to birth, just like Brother David described it. So this is how I see Jesus. He wasn't coming to start a new religion. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. He didn't come to start something called Christianity. That's not what you find in the Gospels. You've got someone who came primarily speaking to his own people to point them back to the mystical heart and soul of their faith. But of course, because he transcended any religion, it wasn't just to Jews that he spoke. He spoke to others who happened to be around, and his words come right through to us today. So this is what I was trying to point to, actually, in my book, How to Be a Bad Christian and a Better Human Being, which is why I am thrilled that our church here in South London at St Leonard's in Streatham has decided to make that book, How to Be a Bad Christian, its Lent book this year. And I got to thinking, well, hey, why don't we do the same thing in the Holy Shed? So here's my proposal, that throughout Lent, we should go about picking through the themes in How to Be a Bad Christian, week by week. And, I can expand upon them and talk about stuff that lies behind them or where I am now with the themes that I've written about there. So basically, I'm inviting you, dear Shedsters, to read the book with me, bit by bit. And if you have any questions or things, that arise out of it that you'd like to raise with me, I'll be very happy for you to message them to me on Facebook or email them on davetomlinson@mac.com. That's davetomlinson@mac.com. And I will happily include your questions or your points in the discussion as we go forward. So next week we'll be beginning with the first 3 chapters of the book, which I can tell you now are about how to keep faith and ditch religion, how to find God without going near a church, and how to love your way to heaven. So those are the first 3 chapters that we'll be looking at next week. I won't be reading the text of the book or anything like that. I'll hope you'll do that, and we can then talk about it in a more open way. And if you don't have a copy, you can buy it. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it a little bit cheaper from my Ko-fi or Coffee page. If you go to the Coffee page and go to the shop, you'll find it there. We've priced it just for this time as £8 plus the post and package. And if you buy it from Coffee and you'd like me to sign it, then all you need to do is message me or send me an email or whatever, and Bob's your uncle. I'll do that, okay? But the likelihood is a lot of you guys have already got that. So I'd like you, even though you've probably read it before somewhere, this next week to read the first 3 chapters, and that's what we'll talk around next week. How to Be a Bad Christian was written very explicitly with a non-religious reader in mind. So, it may be a great Lent series to get other folk, non-church going folk, to sit in on too. Who knows? I guess that what I've been trying to say today, what How to Be a Bad Christian is about, is a resistant protest against all tendencies to formularize the mystery of God, to reduce it to little phrases like saved and born again, or the 4 spiritual laws, if you remember that little booklet. I refuse anything that says, do this or do that, and then, hey presto, here's your certificate, you're in. To me, the mystery of God is all around us, not just in a book. It's everywhere. Wild, undomesticated, beautiful mystery. It's embedded at the heart of you and me as well, every one of us, religious or not religious, for the simple reason that we are creatures of God. I mean, I personally am a man of words. I love words. But it isn't in words of any sort that I finally find or know God. It's in the silencing of the heart in the face of wonder without and within. So here's a prayer that kind of says some of that. And guess what? It's from my new book, OMG. And I wrote this actually just whilst we were travelling around Scotland last summer, me and Pat. And this is a picture that I took up there, and it inspired me to write this little prayer. Spirit of mighty fir trees, highland mountain passes, and wide open skies, for this we were made, to know your presence in the mystery and wonder of things we can never fully comprehend, the glory of morning light, the screech of an eagle, longings too deep to name, bonds of love whose horizons never end. May we walk this earth with passion, curiosity, and wisdom, never for an instant imagining that we have arrived. Amen. Well, if you've got a drink, I'd like you to join me in a very simple toast now. I've got something here which I know what this looks like, but actually it's a Lenten drink. It's 0 alcohol, Guinness. I like it. So whatever drink you've got, join me now in a toast to wonder, a toast to mystery, to constant, never-ending rebirth, reigniting of the fire within, to life, l'chaim. Nice, good one. Well, thanks for being with me. And if you like what I'm doing here in the shed, you can support us. You can buy us a coffee, or indeed a 00 Guinness. You just have to follow the link on the screen now, and we are deeply grateful to everyone who supports us like this or in other ways too. This week, actually, I shall be leading a Soul Space, which is a Zoomed event, along with our friends in Croydon. And it's really very much what we've been talking about today, but from a slightly different perspective, nurturing the inner mystic. It's thinking about how to nourish the kind of mystic within, or to put it in other terms, how to keep on fanning the flames inside of us. So if you can join us for that, I know you'll love it. Great music, poetry, images, film clips, and me as well. What more could you ask? So I hope you can join me, and that would be brilliant. And in a moment, I'm going to finish by giving you a treat of just a little bit more of Brother David Steindl-Rast. It's a prayer that he gives, and it's lovely. So thanks for being with me. Have a great week. I look forward to beginning Lent together as we get together next week. And be kind to people, be kind to the world, be kind, dear friends, most of all to yourselves. Stay human. Enjoy this, a deeply human man in the very best sense. And I'll see you soon.
Giver of all good gifts, you have spread out the world before us like a feast, like a table that is set by your motherly love. Open our hearts to feast at your table, to show our gratitude by remembering all those who have so much less than we have, by letting some of our own wealth overflow to them, by making those who are lonely while we have friends and company, by making them less lonely, by being available for them, and make the whole world one big joyful table fellowship, eating together, singing together, dancing together, all in an overflowing of gratitude.